One of the best levels which a Muslim can reach is when they reach this point of loving what Allah loves and hating what He hates. But this trap which we fall into is when this hate transitions into hating people, judging people, looking down at people. And you're probably thinking, considering the title of this video, I was going to talk about something a lot more serious. And that's exactly the point. This is something which we take too lightly, to be honest. But if you look at Iblis, you see where pride took him. If you look at the countless ahadith and verses talking about the major sins of gossiping, backbiting, wrongly judging others, which are things which people they do on a daily basis for fun, Let's just spill some tea on people. Now, this problem I'm mentioning is actually specifically for people who are very practicing in their deen. And yeah, it sounds a bit confusing. But the problem starts when Allah guides you. He guides you, He makes you do more good deeds. You're doing well on your deen. You have more knowledge on what's halal and haram. But then you see people in university, in school, in the streets who are openly committing sins. And the truth is, your subconscious side, which you can't control, is going to judge them. You will have a worse image of them in your head. And that's something which you can't control. If anything, that's a good thing. And we're going to talk about that later. But what you can control is when these thoughts turn into actions. When, let's say, a person who's smoking politely asks you for something and you, for no reason, disrespect him. Or you give him less attention than he deserves. Or that you automatically become biased to non-smokers and treat them better than people who don't. And smoking is just one example. We can talk about people who are constantly swearing between their friends, people who have girlfriends and boyfriends, people who have addictions. And what we forget is that when you look at these people, these are people who were probably put into families which may have not been religious. They may have been put in certain conditions which are not ideal for their deen. They may have had trauma as a child. Essentially, many conditions which were out of their control. And another person who was put in a very righteous family, that was also out of his control. The first takeaway is that when you look at someone upon first impression, tell yourself to hate the sin and not the sinner. And an example, in school, many people would openly commit sins. And only God knows if they knew this was halal or haram. But regardless, they would treat me with a lot of respect. They would help me when I needed it. Right? There was a lot of goodness in them besides that one or two sins which they were committing, in front of everyone. So if I were to lower their whole image for a certain piece, and I don't know any of their history, any of their backstory, that would be me wronging them. It was said about the Prophet ﷺ that when he saw something which was something displeasing to Allah, something haram, that you could see the dislike on his face. And I have to be honest, when I see some of these things in public, which I mentioned, like, for instance, a group of boys and girls going out as friends and they're jokingly touching each other, dressed inappropriately as well, it hurts. Like, I'm not exaggerating, it actually feels like my heart is being pinched. And I question, how are you doing that in public and ruining your whole image? But I have to calm down because that's just my first innate thought. And this is the main takeaway of this video. So if you take away something, please take this. When you see these things, say alhamdulillah. Say alhamdulillah that you are not doing that. These things which you see in life, they are actually reasons for you to be grateful that Allah has guided you. And remember that there was a point in your life where you had less knowledge, less experience, and you were probably committing sins without realizing. And other people, would you like if they were to look at you and say the same thing? Would you like if they were to judge you for years because of something you did in one small part of your life? When you look at the Sahaba, some of the greatest Sahaba converted really late compared to, for example, Abu Bakr and Khadija radiallahu anhuma. Abu Bakr converted very late into Islam compared to them, and he was literally going to kill the Prophet before becoming a Muslim. You look at, for example, Khalid ibn Walid, which I made a video on, the greatest warrior in Islam. He was probably the main reason which the Muslims did not win the battle of Uhud, when he killed the 10 people on the mountain of archers, Jabal al-Rumah. And then he became one of the last muhajirin to become a Muslim. You look at Abu Sufyan and Hind, his wife, which are were two of the worst kuffar, two of the worst polytheists. And in the end, from the conquest of Mecca, they became Muslims and the Prophet forgave them. So, the person which you are looking at, who may have committed a specific sin or is committing sins every day openly, maybe Allah has a different plan for them, where in a matter of a few days, a few months, a few years, they will be guided to Islam, and that person will become your brother in Islam. That person will become your sister in Islam. One massive disclaimer, I want to clarify something. I am not saying that if I see a person in the street doing something bad, that, oh yeah, it becomes justified for them to do that because they were born into a bad family. It's not their fault. No, in the end, Allah is going to take people to hellfire, and He's going to take people to heaven, them with their sins, them with their deeds. But that's Allah. He is the ultimate judge. He is the one who knows the person in all of his context, which is something which we humans don't know. So frankly, that is none of my business, especially because that thing is to do with them, with Allah. When does it become my business? It becomes my business when a person is disrespecting me, he's disrespecting people, he's fighting people, when a person is oppressing people, bombing hospitals, killing innocent civilians, for instance, an extreme example, then I would say that this person, I hate him, and this person, rightfully so, I will judge him in this manner. Just wanted to clarify that, because I know some people can twist my words and then ask certain questions in the comments. So I hope you guys can logically make these distinctions in your head, and I hope. Now, the religion is obviously a religion of balance, and the reality of judging is that it's a double-edged sword. So you need to know how to navigate it, and it will take you to an amazing direction. But if you navigate it wrong, it will take you down the path of Iblis, to be honest. We've all heard of that quote which says that you are the average of the 5 people you spend time with. And it's so true. Like, when you spend time with your friends, honestly, you literally become so much like them to the point where you laugh like them, So there's no doubt that you have to be firm. You actually have to be judgmental to choose who to keep close to you and choose who to keep away from you. Because judging is justifiable to the max when these things are going to affect you and they're going to affect people around you. The part where you shouldn't judge is when the things which they are doing are not affecting anyone, but they are between them and Allah. Because that is something which, it's none of my business. And besides friends, actually a case where I would advise people to be more judgmental is when they're marrying. You literally see people who will pick the love of their life because the person has attractiveness and they have a good personality. But when it comes to many of the things which they do, they are displeasing to Allah. And they will justify it in many ways just because, again, they're attracted to their looks and personality. And this is where I would tell you, no, please judge them more. You should be more firm, have a more strict criteria, because when you start judging less and less in this case, you start becoming a sheep following a herd. You start letting people drag you around. You start being way more soft than you should be. So Again, try to find that perfect balance between the two. Just try being like the Prophet as much as possible. Try being humble. You know, the Prophet would always thank Allah for guidance, for all of his victories. And at the same time, he was very patient with people. Alayhi salatu wasalam. He would advise people. Obviously, his whole life is based on spreading, encouraging people to do what's good, leaving off what's bad. So we as Muslims also have a similar role. So why would you, you know, take this dark path of judging where it just creates more divisions between people? Anyways, hope you guys benefited, and please make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. It means a lot to me. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.